Oh, we're getting closer to that first round of the NBA draft, and we'll know officially that, let's just say, the Dallas planting that flag of Cooper in Dallas. The freshman, of course, coming out as possibly being the #1 pick. No doubt there. Nico Harrison do the right thing like Spike Lee and take Cooper at 1. But coming off that freshman year when he produced that best one-and-done season in college basketball, you look at the stats: points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks, and leading his team to the Final Four. So we know that's going to be #1. The draft starts beyond that. After that, maybe 2, Dylan Harper goes to San Antonio. But then 3 through 8, everything gets a little spicy. Trey Johnson projected there by Adam Finkelstein to go 3 to Philly. BJ Edgecombe at 4. Con Knipple at 5. And Ace Bailey, the second piece of that Rutgers duo there with Harper, falling to 6. And then others, of course, we will see how that pans out in the top 10. All right, we got the 2 best pieces here and all of everything when it comes to it here, Adam Finkelstein and Matt Norlander. And Matt, I'll start with you and talk about Ace Bailey, because this is a guy we talked about throughout the season that could be a top 3 pick, but we just saw it there possibly falling to 6. There's been rumors of him maybe forcing his way to D.C. or New Orleans with the Pelicans. Is this a lot of smoke here, or your thoughts on that?
So I'm semi-skeptical of the smoke. I really can't wait to get to draft night just to see where this guy winds up going. We've reached a point with Ace Bailey that even like a week and a half ago, I don't think folks thought we'd get here. I think he has this. If every player plays to their potential, I think Bailey has the second, third at worst highest ceiling of any player in the draft. The idea that he's not going to go work for Philly and that's going to prevent Philadelphia from drafting him just doesn't pass the smell test for me. If Daryl Morey in that room truly on the big board for Philly has Ace Bailey's name at #3, then he's going to be selected 3rd. The idea that he's just going to simply be held from doing so doesn't pass the smell test for me. If he doesn't go, I will say this: if he does not go 3rd or 4th in this draft, then he will be a victim of some serious mismanagement, because even in spite of Rutgers not having a good season, you see Dylan Harper's going to go 2nd to San Antonio, barring some, massive trade that would flip the draft upside down. Harper will go #2 to the Spurs. Bailey had the stock and the performance and the athleticism and everything to attach him to being, a safe projected top 4 pick. And the idea that now we're talking about the possibility that he could slip to 6, 7, maybe his absolute floor is 8, it's kind of unthinkable to me, but I still consider it very, very possible that he winds up going in the top 4 because the upside is so massive.
Yeah, guys, here's the deal on Bailey and specifically his representation. They like the fit with the teams who pick between 6 and 8 more than they do the teams who pick 3 and 5. They are adamant that he is a top 3 prospect in this draft. And more importantly than where he gets selected is the runway to prove it next year as an NBA rookie. Now, don't get me wrong. They would like him picked atop this draft because of the salary implications. And they are hoping that either Washington, New Orleans, or Brooklyn trades up into the top 5 with the chance to get him. But if not, by refusing to work out for the teams that pick between 3 and 5, they are content to let him go to one of those spots, with Washington being at this point the most likely outcome. And that would be strictly because they have essentially played a game of chicken with the executives from Philadelphia, Charlotte, and Utah by refusing to visit those 3 places.
All right, so it's more about the fit based on his representation. We know the talent is there, as both of you illustrated that already. Matt, I'm curious, when you talk about the range of where a Cedric Coward can fit, maybe that 10 to 18, what do you hear about the buzz from him from Washington State?
Well, I did a huge feature on Coward last week. He's one of my favorite NBA draft profiles I've ever done. An immensely impressive player, person, the whole deal. And, for the past month or so, there have been 3, although there's been a number of franchises that have shown real interest. Some of them will not have, unfortunately, unless they are motivated and able to trade up, they're not going to come close to getting them. The Clippers being one of those who have been there almost since the start, but the Clippers hold the 30th pick. There are 3 franchises in the top 20 that have consistently showed some real genuine interest. I'll be intrigued to see if Coward winds up going to any of these 3. The best position team is now actually Phoenix as a virtue of that trade with Houston. So the Suns at 10. Portland at 11 has been consistently intrigued and interested. And then Washington at 18. Now, Coward might not be there for them at 18. I'd be a little surprised, even though the interest has been there with Phoenix and Portland. If he went 10 or 11, there are some folks that push back on the notion, He started in D3. There's not a ton of evaluation and tape against high-level opponents. Will he be able to make that jump? Will he justify being a top 15 overall pick? But speaking of the 15th pick, you know, I know there's a little bit of rumbling about whether Oklahoma City would be capable and able to move up in the draft. I personally find that hard to believe that any NBA franchise would enable the sitting best team in the league that is poised to remain atop that mountaintop for the years to come to better them by allowing them to get a pick into the lottery. But if they sit there at 15 and Coward's sitting there, that actually feels like a really good fit. So keep an eye on him. I think he's the best story of the draft overall. And if you want to know more about it, you can go to CBSSports.com or the CBS Sports app to read that profile.
Matt, Tim Presti is somewhere smirking at your comments. He was like, all right, just wait and see what I do. Remember, I have all these picks there loading in the drafts for years to come. Outside of that, San Antonio, they have 2 in the first round. Assuming that they go number 2 with Dylan Harper here, Adam, at 14, are we thinking of big men there heading to Texas?
Yeah, we are. In fact, this is something that we reported yesterday here on CBS Sports Net and CBS Sports HQ, and that is that I believe the Spurs are targeting a big man. They had Kaman Malawach in for a workout. Now, Malawach will not be on the board at 14. So the only way his representation would allow him to go conduct that workout is if he believed that the Spurs were a legitimate candidate to trade up. So I think from that alone, we can deduct that the Spurs are in the market to trade up. Now, they already have Wemby. Why would they want Malawach? Well, rumor is that Wemby likes the idea of playing the 4, little Anthony Davis-esque, if you will. And if you were to pair Wemby with Malawach, you would have certainly the most intimidating defensive tandem for the next decade plus that you could possibly imagine. Wemby is absolutely unprecedented with his measurements. Malawach is 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. Now, if they can't trade up, I would keep an eye on someone like Joan Berenja, who's got a 7'4" wingspan of his own. I do think that the Spurs will try and get one of those 2 players in the lottery. If they can't, then I think they would pivot to a wing, and that's where someone like Coward could be in play.
Adding some more size there next to Wemby, as you mentioned, there's something to watch. And Matt, when you talk about Trey Johnson, maybe in that top 10, maybe top 5, where do you see the ideal fit for him?
So Adam and I agree. I think if we could project and we think, you know, Trey Johnson, what he'll ultimately be, like he's got top 3 stock. For me, I actually have Trey Johnson number 2 overall as a prospect in this class. But to this point, just keep an eye on Philly on Wednesday. No one really knows what's going to happen there. I know Adam in one of his most recent mocks had Johnson to number 3. But at this point, Trey Johnson's camp most consistently has gotten back positive feedback from Charlotte at 4 and Utah at 5. I think us here at CBS have probably been the most consistently aggressive and optimistic on Johnson's prospects, both as a player and where we think he'll go in the draft. I think if you look elsewhere, you might see him mocked to 6 or 7 at this point. And it certainly could happen. There's a real big jumble there between 3 and 6. We wait and see if any of those teams trade out or swap spots. But right now, Trey Johnson, who if he really can grow into a high-level shooter and scorer in the NBA, like there is a realistic scenario where he winds up as one of the 3 best players in this draft. He might not go top 3, but right now either Charlotte at 4 or Utah at 5. There's buzz there that one of those 2 franchises will eventually pull the trigger.
Yeah, I had him mocked yesterday to Phoenix at the 3rd overall pick, and I understand VJ Edgecombe is probably the most likely outcome here, but I've been told that Philadelphia has very sincere interest in Johnson, and whether that comes at 3 or whether maybe even more likely they explore scenarios to trade down and grab him, whether it's 1, 2, 3 spots lower. There is certainly a strong interest in Trey Johnson in Philadelphia. That's going to be something very interesting to watch here because I do think this draft starts at number 3. So whether they take Edgecombe, whether they take Johnson, whether they take Bailey, or whether they move the pick in hopes of drafting Johnson or as a backup plan, Con Kneppel, I think those are all viable options right now for the Sixers, and everybody else is waiting to see what they do with that 3rd pick.
Johnson, what the kids call him, a walking bucket in the SEC Freshman of the Year this past season. And Adam, we said the same thing 2 months ago about Walter Clayton. He did cancel some workouts. He has an idea of where he's going. What are you hearing? Where do you have him projected?
Brandon, I tried to tell people on this one. You know, I tried to tell them. Listen, this guy is too good of a shooter. It's not about leading Florida to an NCAA championship. It's about the fact that in the NBA, he has a skill that is highly coveted, and he's got the body type to be a better defender in the NBA than he is in college. Now, what I'm hearing most recently is that he went back to Miami for a 2nd workout, and then subsequently he canceled workouts with teams selecting at the end of the first round. Now, some have concluded that means he has a promise, but I think at minimum we can conclude that his representation is very comfortable that he will be off the board in the top 25. Miami has to be considered a possible destination, but I think places like New Orleans, Orlando are definitely viable as well. I've also heard that Phoenix would be interested in moving up to try and get in the mix for him. So I think Walter Clayton looks like he's going to be in a very good spot in just about 36 hours from now.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard of some of the same. In fact, I talked to 2 teams that pick, I'll say they pick after the number 22 in the draft here. And I talked to them the past week, and they have arrived at a conclusion that it is unlikely that they think Clayton will be on the board for them at that point. And as someone who predominantly covers the college game and obviously parachutes in to do some draft coverage and checks in with some NBA sources, it is refreshing to see a player who was as clearly dominant, successful, great shooter as Clayton get rewarded for this. There have been many instances in the past where top 5 level college players that are guards that don't project because defensively or however you want to look at it, they just don't project to the next level to be a top 5, a top 10, a top 15, a first round pick. And Clayton, for a variety of reasons, has been able to break that mold, frankly, even though he's not remotely the same kind of player. I think the success of a Jalen Brunson has also helped him on some sort of level. And so, yes, Clayton, good for him. He's worked hard for it. His workouts have been good. And now he seems to be entering into that range where he should be somewhere between, say, 15 and 22 or 23 on draft night. He's earned it. I said it on the Eye on College Basketball podcast mock draft episode we did with Gary Parrish and Kyle Boone. I do think we will get 8, 9, 10 years down the road, and we will look at the 2025 draft class. And although Clayton's not going to be picked in the top 10, I think he will have one of the 10 to 12 most successful NBA careers from this class.
I just hope that he doesn't go to the Magic, because we will never hear it again from Zach Aldridge. We know he's a Gator fan and a Magic fan, so that's the only thing I ask for tomorrow. NBA, please do not send him to the Magic. Before I let both of you guys go here, Adam, anything out there we should be watching the closer we get to that 8 p.m. deadline tomorrow?
Yeah, there's some definite Jeremiah Fears buzz right now, and specifically with people wondering out loud whether he could be in play for Utah at number 5. Jeremiah Fears is probably the most polarizing prospect in this class, and regardless of who thinks he's got what kind of upside, all it takes is one decision maker to make the call. Now, Austin Ainge has taken over as the president of basketball operations for Utah, and that means, from what we are told, that he not only has control over their draft room, but that he will not be held accountable for draft picks in previous years. So if he doesn't like Isaiah Collier or any of those guys, he can just move on and pick someone else at the same position. And if he thinks Fears has the talent to be an alpha-type playmaker in the NBA, Fears could be in the mix at 5. We are hearing that pretty consistently. If Fears gets a bump up, it means somebody will bump down. And if that happens, I'm told that Con Knippel could be the guy to start to slide instead of at the top of the lottery, potentially to the mid-lottery. So those are 2 intertwined variables to keep an eye on here in the next 36 hours.
That would be surprising there, Adam, because I know you haven't projected there in top 6. A lot of people may be top 4, top 5. The reason why Con Knippel might fall, thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's an upside conversation to be had, but I think it's also just a matter of if someone likes a different player more. So, for example, I have Knippel firmly over Fears. If Austin Ainge or some other program values Fears above him, then by just naturally it's going to knock Knippel down. So there's no doubt, I think, that Knippel has a very high floor, that he's going to make an immediate impact. So I think I should emphasize this is not necessarily a knock on Knippel as much as it is that there may be some NBA decision makers who are willing to invest in the upside of other prospects more so. But to be clear, I do not believe Knippel should fall. He's one of my favorite prospects in the draft, and on my board, he is a firm top 6 guy.
Household name right next to Cooper Flagg. We saw that in that season with Duke, both freshmen, by the way. But as always, fellas, appreciate your time. Just so you know, no sleeping all the way to tomorrow into the weekend. We got a lot of work before we get to the draft, but appreciate it as always. Don't forget, you can catch everything when it comes to the draft right here in HQ, starting tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. On the clock. You see all those logos? Guess what? Who's going to pick the next star? We will see tomorrow night.